Alright, welcome back. This is a review for Fruits Basket Season 2, Episode 21/46, and what did I tell you last week? This is another tearjerker episode, and that's because it is Yuki's backstory. We finally get, we've gotten throughout the series little bits and pieces of his backstory, but this time we actually get his entire backstory in full, and we finally understand the different context of things and find out kind of the different relationships that he had with both Kyo and also Akito, and also learned some interesting things about Akito, which I'll bring up here in a second. Hopefully this won't be a long video. It probably will, though, just because it's probably, talking about this sort of stuff. But I'll try to bring up some of the major stuff as I go through the episode. But we start off with Yuki's backstory, and pretty much we get him and his getting to meet Akito for the first time as a young child, and you get this really interesting thing where when he first meets Akito, he sees him and he just starts crying. But you get this really interesting dialogue where you have young Yuki being like, "I want to meet you," and then you have the voice of older Yuki being like, "I don't want to meet you," and it's just this, I want to hug you, I want to run away, and it's so cool, that little what they did there with that audio thing. But it's also just part of the curse itself, and that just like how Reen had explained previously, that it may have been something good prior, that this bond that they share was something that was something that was good. It was something that was happy, but over the years now it's become something more of a burden, and that's why Yuki has described that he was conflicted over what he was feeling, because he both wanted to embrace Akito and be like, "Yes, I finally get to meet you again as the rat," but at the same time I want to run away because I don't want to be here anymore. I don't want to be part of this cycle of just constantly being reborn so we could see each other. But we get some interesting things about Akito himself, in that we find out that Akito actually wasn't as bad that when he was young. He actually was an okay kid, kind of, and we'll get into that. But he wasn't as abusive as he is now. He wasn't, whether that's physically or verbally or whatever, but he wasn't really as abusive, at least initially, when Yuki first met Akito. And that they were, and of course his mom basically, again, kind of sold him out to the Akito. But at the beginning of it, I don't really think Yuki really, of course he was young, so he didn't really pay attention. But if things had gone on the way they did, he probably really wouldn't have minded being around with Akito. Because Akito, when you see that they're just sitting there and they're playing, Akito's like, "Oh, hey, I'm the gods, that makes me special, but, the rat's the closest to the gods, that means you're special too, you're just like me, Yuki." And so it was like, he actually seemed to actually be pretty nice, and actually seemed to get along with Yuki pretty well, and was not abusing him at the time. But then we get and you even see Akito. Yuki admits that he even remembers seeing Akito crying at some point a lot, and Shigure being there and comforting him when he was a child. And then the only real sign that is again, but Akito's always just been. It's not like Akito was sunshine and rainbows. He was still kind of a bratty kid, in that he got upset one time with Yuki telling him to stop coughing. But you see a reaction on his face once he does tell Yuki to stop coughing. That it wasn't just like he was yelling at him and then that was it. He yelled at him, but then he had the reaction to this kind of change of expression on his face, being like, "Oh man, I kind of shouldn't." He kind of actually showed remorse for actually being mean to someone and telling them to shut up for something that they can't really control. So it's interesting that you see that at least Akito did have at some point in his life some form of moral compass, even if it didn't last very long. And Yuki says he had tantrums every now and then, but nothing like he did obviously later at current time. But yeah, Akito definitely wasn't definitely, again, still bratty, but not as, definitely in no way as bad as he is now. But as Yuki said, one day he just snapped, and he wound up, was painting the walls all black, and that's why, Yuki kind of reacted to the black paint in the last episode. Um, but, Akito's just like, you Yuki, your world is pitch black, and if my world's pitch black, then your world should be pitch black, and you should be pitch black just as much as I am, and you're just like me. And then Akito's like, no, wait, you can't. I'm the one who's special. I'm the one that's needed in this world. I'm not useless. So that means, Yuki, since I'm special and I'm needed, that means you're the one who's useless. You're the one that's not needed in this world. You're the one that's not wanted. You're the one that's hated. Um, and Akito just kind of started verbal. That's, you don't know what exactly at this current time. You don't know what exactly caused Akito to snap, but something caused Akito to snap. But not, you're not sure quite what it is yet. Um, and Yuki, over time, kind of, that was the first time he heard any of this sort of stuff, especially from Akito. But he kind of started believing it, and it was a slow process, but he really kind of started realizing it the day, the next time that they had their, the New Year's festival, the banquet. And he realized that no one, like all the other Zodiac members, were interacting with each other and talking and playing, but no one was doing that with him. He was kind of alone and by himself. And then, and not even his brother, which we know why, even he didn't pay attention to him. And then, or even talk to him. And so Yuki goes outside, and he actually runs into Kyo. And surprisingly, the first thing that Yuki thinks when he sees Kyo is, oh, he has his hair color is such a really lovely orange color. And of course, Kyo, going through what we know, that he's already going through his trauma at this moment. That his mother's already committed suicide, and his father's blaming him for everything. Um, that he basically is already, he already hates Yuki, and he pretty much tells that to him right to his face, which is unfortunate because Yuki just came out there not even knowing who Kyo was, and just having met him for the first time, and actually wanting to be friends with him. And but because Kyo already has an idea of who he is in his head, winds up telling him, I don't like you, I hate you, you should just go away, and he up and leaves. And it's so unfortunate, it's so sad, because if it weren't for the fact that pretty much this entire family has pitted these two boys against each other, they would have, like, that scene right then and there, they probably would have became friends if it hadn't been for them being pitted against each other at such a young age, and told that it's the other's, fault, and that they should blame the other person, or that they should hate the other person. If it hadn't, if this entire family had not pitted them against each other, they would have been like best friends, starting from like, or at least just friends starting from that point in their lives. But that's not how the story goes, unfortunately. Or else that would be a completely different Fruits Basket story. um, but Yuki really kind of starts to accept that he really is worthless, that really no one does like him, that he really is hated. And but and even his mom, when he tries to tell her that he wants to go home, she just ignores him and pushes him aside. Um and then we overhear that, and even Yuki overhears that, from some other just random people in the Soma, interstate, that, oh, his mom and his parents are living this lavish life, but, they basically sold him out to Akito in order to be his playmate, so that they could get more money and wealth and position in the family. Um, and Yuki, of course, not wanting to be hated, and me not wanting to be left alone and be isolated again, even though he he kind of well he kind of self isolates himself, and that even when he goes to school, and you see him driving down the street with his mom, he sees Yuki, he sees Kyo and Haru and Kagura and Momiji all kind of walking to school together and being goofballs, kind of doing the normal interactions, and um, he wishes, you can tell, even though he doesn't actually say it, he wishes that he could be there. He wishes that he could be a part of that. He wants to be friends with them. He wants to be able to hang out with them and do stuff with them that he can't do because he's he's not being allowed to do these things. He's being isolated. He's being and 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 his mom again is just being controlling of him and being like, oh well, he doesn't have any opinions of his own, and she's sending him to this. She's like, I'm gonna send him to this even fancier. She said she sent him to an even higher class, like a boys only school than the rest of the Soma boys would be sent to. Um, and so Yuki is, by himself, and then you get this one little, besides Toru's interaction later this episode, you get this one little ray of sunshine in this entire episode, this one little happy moment in Yuki's childhood where, he makes friends, where, eventually at school, even though he was kind of avoiding everybody, there's two boys that come up and they say, hey, let's play soccer together. And he makes friends and he has fun and it's great and he's smiling and he's happy and he's like, these are my first times I had friends, this is so great. And this is something that he's always wanted. It's one of the things of which he's always wished for. And then of course we finally get the context for the information that we found out way back in season 1, that he had some friends at some point that accidentally found out that he was the rat and everyone had to get their memories erased. And yeah, that we get that, but now we have it under the context of those were his first friends that he ever made. And that now he doesn't have any friends again anymore, that he was lonely and he was isolated and he was lonely and he just wanted someone to be there for him, someone to share in his joy and his laughs and his sorrows, and yet and even in some of his interests, but yet he can't because now the only friends that he did make are now gone, and that they had to get their memories erased from them. And you see him sitting on it's so sad, you see him crying on Hattori's lap going, please don't erase my friends' memories, they're the first ones I had. And it's like, no, why? It's so sad. Yuki he really winds up believing this after that point. Because again, Akito was like, hey, I told you, don't delude yourself, that you really are alone in this world. And he winds up one day walking home from school, and a hat kind of gets blown down and into his path, and Kyo shows up being like, hey, I forgot my hat flew off, let me go grab it. He's talking to Kazuma, and Yuki sees it, picks it up, and is like, oh, here, this is your hat. And Kyo just stares at him and runs off. And Yuki thinks to himself, there's things. You go back to I think it's like episode 13 or something of season 1, where Akito visits the school for the first time, and at the end of that episode, Yuki had some very specific dialogue that he thought, and you see it again here for the first time, that he says, there were things that I wanted a happy home to go to, for people to be, that were, enjoyed, that that I enjoyed being around, or that enjoyed being around me, a place that I could call home, and those are things that I wanted. And he's thinking, and I wanted to be friends with with Kyo, and he just breaks down and he cries because he realizes that he's probably not gonna get these things, and he just cries, and it's so sad. But Yuki, he kind of gives in to the despair of everything, that he won't be able to have a loving family and a happy home to go to, and and friends to hang out with. He probably won't ever have these things, and he gives into that despair. And he slowly but steadily believes the things of which Akito has told him, that he's hated and not needed and not wanted in this world. And because even the one time again with Ayame, that he when he reached out to try and get Ayame's attention, he was rejected. So he's like, why even bother trying to reach out to people, and when I'm just going to get hurt and rejected anyway? Why be friends with someone if I'm just going to get hurt? Um, and so he and then so he winds up uh, shutting himself in, which is what he later says. That instead of kind of pushing forward, he shuts himself in. Um, but then one day he winds up, after he gets sick, and then Akito's just like, "Oh, are you going to die, Yuki?" And it's like, "Akito, just stop, Akito. You're just no." Um, he winds up running away, and he didn't know whether it was because something, as he said, something burst inside him. He didn't know whether it was just because he wanted to hurt himself, or whether he just wanted to keep running and find some kind of freedom. But he ran, and of course he winds up running into Kyoko. He doesn't actually meet her, but he kind of runs into Kyoko crying and hilariously giving description of what Tohru looks like because she got lost. uh, it's so funny because the Fruits Basket can still do that, to where you can be in this really dark, intense moment, and this is, again, it's another testament to Natsutake writing, where you can be in this dark, intense moment, but you can still have these little small, light snippets of comedy to kind of help relieve the situation a little bit. And, with Kyoko trying to describe Tohru, it's like, she's cute, she has cute hair, she has a cute ribbon, she's wearing cute clothes. It's like, that's funny, but that's not very helpful, Kyoko. um, but Yuki finds Tohru, and he's like, "Oh, I gotta go. Let me go run back to the lady so I can tell her that where her daughter is." And he very quickly discovers that nope, Tohru is following him, and he doesn't want her to hug her again, hug him, not again, but he doesn't want her to hug him, and so he, he but he realizes when she trips and falls, and she desperately looks back up to him and gets back up, he realizes that she needs me. She's relying on me, and so I need to go, and I need to make sure I get her back to home safely. And for the first time in his life, Yuki's like, I'm needed in this world. I am wanted. I am needed. Someone is relying on me at this current time and day, and that's something that I need to embrace, and something that I need to try to remember this. And so, of course, he brings her back, and then he runs off, gives her the hat. So it's you get to find out that Yuki is in fact the boy in Tohru's story that gave her the hat, but the hat itself is actually Kyo's hat, which is interesting. But then we get Yuki and Ace in his rat form, and he's like, even if I never make friends, and even if she forgets that, about what happened this day, I want to remember that this is a time when I really was needed in this world, and that I really am wanted, and that will give me some kind of hope, and that to know that that this world isn't all just darkness, that there is some light in it. And of course he goes back to Akito. Oops, sorry. He goes back to Akito, and again, it said for initially it did work, and that him holding on to that hope kind of did help him to hold on, to keep courage, and through all the stuff that he was going through of his isolation. But over time, it really didn't. In the end, it didn't work, because he did, not quickly, but pretty over a course of years, he did fall back into despair. And as he said, it's just a good line, and that hope turned into despair, and then adoration turned into envy. And I just really, I wanted him to like me, referring to Kyo, and I just wanted him to be my friend, but, over time I saw that that wasn't really possible. Or at least not in the normal sense of a possible way. And, but he says, but then one day, she came back to me, and of course, Kakeru's just sitting there going, "What are you talking about? What winds up being so, pitiful and pathetic?" And Yuki, this time, he actually straight up says, it was, it's something that, I haven't told her. She came back to me right when I needed it most, just when I thought, all hope was lost. She came back, and she, because of just being with her and being close to her and being, getting to eat meals with her, and then getting to talk with her, and her not being, her hearing out my pain and my sorrow, as well as her not judging me about these things, has led me to be able to really recover from all this, start to recover and start to really develop as my own person. And of course, he says, he ends up saying that the way I feel about her is, she's just going back to the beach arc. He says, she's like the sky above. She's so close but yet so far. She's like a mother to me. And because but she's beloved, but she's like a mother to me. And it's like, yes, it's like, it's so sweet. And yes, that is how Yuki feels about her. And that is how Yuki feels about Tohru, and that he doesn't see her as a love interest. And you can tell he doesn't see her as a love interest, especially when you compare how Kyo, because he is comparing his feelings with how Kyo interacts with her, and he's like, no, that's not how I kind of interact with her and how I feel about her. It's, I feel like she's my mother, basically. And that's because that's one of the few things that Yuki hasn't had in his entire life. He hasn't really had a mother. His mom, again, his parents basically sold him out to Akito, and there was never really any mother figure in his life that would come over and comfort him and, support him and encourage him. And Tohru was really the first person to do those things, that she actually, and she supported, she comforted him when he was in pain, she encouraged him, she supported him, she gave him, in a sense, wisdom with, some of the things that she has said. And it's just so nice to see. And I actually really like this, Yuki's and Toru's relationship here, because at least they're kind of him seeing her, they're kind of friends, but he kind of sees her as, his mom. Because it's not a relationship that you really see a lot, especially in shoujo type animes. Because typically it'll be like, he's the guy, and he has some kind of feelings towards. He's one of the main male characters. He has some kind of feelings towards the main female character. Oh, it has to be romantic love. But it turns out that no, it's not romantic love. It's a platonic love, and that he loves her like a mother. And it's nice to see that sort of stuff in, especially in a shoujo series. And it's a testament to Natsuki Take's writing, and that she doesn't just write characters who have tropey and then just leaves them that way, and she doesn't just write romance into the story for the sake of romance. She actually writes it in there, and then she delves into it, she explains it, and then she shows that no, not everything in, of course, Fruits Basket obviously is romance, that there are things that are different. But I don't know if you understood that, but but it's, again, I love this dynamic of the relationship. That I love the fact that he thinks of her as a mother, especially for him. But it's and so actually, I was going to go back to this. So it's funny because last week's episode would have ended on the exact same line again. So I understand why they didn't end it, because last week he would have thought, if he had actually finished his line, that, the way I feel, the thing that I yearned from Tohru most was a mother. And so it'd be weird to have in the 2 episodes in a row with him thinking one thing and then ending it the next episode on the exact same thing, but in this case, him saying it out loud to Kakeru. So I understand why they didn't want to have him end it on saying the exact same thing, and instead left last week's is a cliffhanger. But it's such a sweet story, but it's so sad at the same time. Well, it's mainly sad, but but again, you get some really interesting things with, you could see that, yeah, Yuki really wants to be friends with Kyo, and even if he does become friends with him now, it's not gonna be the same sort of, just because of everything that's gone on between them at this point. It's gonna take, if they were to just, let's say, straight up and become friends next episode, or at least trying to start to move that way, it's gonna take a long time. It's gonna take quite a bit for them to actually be able to move on, to actually be able to properly become friends, just because of everything that's gone on between them. But I think that's really about it. Again, this episode has a lot of interesting little details, a lot of interesting little things, and especially with Yuki's character development. And it's so good to actually see him. Now that we know his backstory, especially now if you go back and watch all of what we've seen so far of both season 1 and season 2, you can really, especially if you go back and watch at least the first episodes of season 1, you can really see the development that he has, because he doesn't know Kakeru that well. I mean, he does. Kakeru is a friend of his, but it's not like he's someone super close. But he's been able to, at least he obviously feels some form of connection or in kinship and friendship with Kakeru, that he's able to actually open up about these things. And I don't know, it's so good. Anyway, I've talked too much. I'm just gonna go ahead and end this. So next week is gonna be kind of we're gonna finish up this little thing. We're gonna finish up Kakeru and Yuki's conversation, and so that will be about, and we'll get some other things as well. But that's about it. So thanks for watching, and bye for now.